that was the workbook in which I listed. And by the way, imagine that I intentionally left something out because I was really waiting for someone among the reviewers to complain about it. And no one complained. So they didn't notice that I didn't include the initiative. But that's also true, right? A traditional male attribute. If you ask any woman which man they consider masculine, initiative is surely in the top 10. False. I didn't include it, and no one missed it, even though many bought the program. Anyway, but obviously this belongs there too. So what else do I ask? Envy, for example. Envy, emotional intelligence, these things. All right. Envy. This is one of the spiritual lessons, spiritual guidance. Sexuality cannot be examined in isolation. And that's why many measure, for example, urologists' success, because they only consider physical factors or organ failure. Spiritual matters also count. And one of the basic tenets, well, this was another big realization for me, is that what we envy in another person, we will not receive from them either. We will distance ourselves from the object of envy. Anna. I did not specifically realize this in relation to erection. So I can't give you an example of knowing a man who envied Joe Pista because he was always erect and had already slept with all the women in the village. No, I can't say anything like that. It was different. I brought it over. Well, you can also draw conclusions like this from other areas of life or about other subjects. I brought it over to when feelings matter the most. This is also somehow brain or otherwise. It's also spiritual guidance, but at the same time, it's also brain. When there is a desired state, in this case, rock solid potency, and the man thinks, wow, it would be great if this were the case. And someone, let's say this Joe Smith, pops into his mind that he, for instance, has it, and he feels envy, then immediately a negative feeling, which is envy, anger, rage, resentment, attaches itself to this pleasant, desired feeling. But the starting point is envy. It doesn't mean that this is one of the deadly sins. And the beautiful, desired wind has already been tainted. That's no longer beautiful. The subconscious is a part of our functioning that cannot select. So it accepts everything. I often say, and in a crude way, that it's dumb. So it cannot decide whether this is actually a good thing. No, it just feels like, damn, whenever I think about an erection, I get angry, I get jealous, like, damn, Johnny looks so good with it. And it doesn't feel like, wow, this is a fantastic, pleasant, desired state that I also want to reach and that I love. What we reject, what we have negative feelings about will not manifest in our lives. How so? The subconscious protects us from the negative or the bad. It doesn't want what we feel negatively about to come in. Only what is positive, what we welcome with open arms, with an open heart, and what we have good feelings about should come in. And this is one of them. The other is the feeling of familiarity. I didn't come up with this. When a feeling Or, well, when something happens and we feel something, it spreads that this feeling is associated with it. And when we find ourselves in a similar situation next time, that feeling is activated from the subconscious. And now again, with Joska Pista, there I am in vocational school, and Joska Pista has already been with all the girls. But I can't get it up, or I don't know, I'm withdrawn, and it doesn't work out, or I don't even try, so it doesn't matter. Generally, in such situations, a person doesn't blame themselves, but rather Joska Pista. This is the first thing that sinks into the subconscious, that the erection or the successful relationship or the ability to charm the girls is.
It depends on the luck or anything else, but definitely not something positive or attainable for me. But how rude he is. And why do people degrade others' achievements at times like this? They look for the flaw in it. Oh, well, he's probably successful. He's probably successful with girls because, and not because, I don't know. I can't even think of an example right now. Help me out. Give an example. Why does a teenage boy think that another boy is more successful than him? Yes, no, because he doesn't think as much. He's much more macho. Yeah. So things like that, I think. Yes, he's actually rude. And girls like that, he's so indifferent, approximately. This. Very good. These were negative descriptors, right? There was nothing positive in that. You didn't say anything like that, and that's why I asked you to say it. Because this way, we can confront the viewers with the fact that you didn't say anything like, because he knows how to treat girls, because he's kind to the girls, or polite, or because he helps the girls, because he behaves manly. Yes. Because he knows what to talk about with the girls and doesn't bore them to death with the details of Formula One. Because he's patient, because he waits until a girl says yes. Because he takes the effort, the time, the energy, and walks the girl home from the series. All things that require effort, extras, and positives, that's what you are at such times. It doesn't occur to you that this person has achieved something, and that's why he succeeds. And I don't accept the excuse that he succeeds because he's so handsome. No, because there are handsome guys who nobody wants because they repel girls so much, or simply not. So this doesn't always apply either. Okay, so these are the kinds of excuses. Instead of people feeling within themselves, what is the deficiency in me that the other person has? Well, but returning to this. So the first memory or the first ingrained feeling is that only the jerks, only the bad boys succeed. As you also mentioned, the macho, and I don't even know, the one who doesn't think and doesn't care. So that's why when already you want to perform with a girl, let's say you turned 18 and now let's just pick an age randomly and it's the first opportunity, then what is the feeling that gets activated from the subconscious regarding the erection? What was previously stored and felt that negative things are needed for this to come together. It won't come together. I understand. No matter how much you try to override it with consciousness, it doesn't matter because the subconscious governs our lives. Of course, to some extent, our consciousness does too, doesn't it? Well, I read that it's 5%, which is obviously very little, but then I don't know who calculated this percentage. Obviously, these percentages, as it's unclear how they were calculated. But the point is that the subconscious dominates. Envy is not a good thing, not even for this reason, but also because nothing good ever comes from it. Envious people usually ruin others' lives with their envy, if they can do it, if they are able to do so. So, if the erection is restored, let it be restored, because the person will use it for a good purpose afterwards. This is a basic concept for me. I don't want to help men restore their erectile dysfunction if they will use it for bad purposes afterwards. So, for those who will use it for that,
rape women or humiliate women, or whatever he couldn't do until now because of his impotence, I don't want to help him, and I really hope he doesn't come near my program, because the spirit of the program is not to help everyone, but to help those who are genuinely well-intentioned, good, with a good attitude, and wants to use the erection for good. This is not intelligence. Well, this is a very strong therapeutic experience that it has happened so many times over many years that I asked the men who came to me what they could tell me about their sexual life from 0 years up to now. And it was astonishing that the vast majority did not talk about loves, did not talk about feelings, and treated sexual life separately on its own, without emotions. And when I had to ask directly, like at least in kindergarten, there was a love for animals, or in school, or even a hopeless crush or anything. In many cases, they still couldn't show anything like that, or they told it with great difficulty. Interestingly, they often found it harder to talk about than their sexual life. I never had a problem opening someone up about sexuality or talk, but interestingly, I had to ask about love more often. And it was as if it surprised them. And then I realized that this is a huge shortcoming for a large number of men, but obviously not for everyone, because many men can connect love with sex. Many men can't even make love to a woman they don't have feelings for. And their intercourse can truly be called making love or being in love. But many have already separated the two and have forgotten. So they had to be guided back to this. And in many therapies, I had to elevate men's emotional intelligence. There was another very common case. I started involving women in the sexual therapy process. And when I asked them what the problem with the man was, they never said it was erectile dysfunction or premature ejaculation. No. What did they say? The lack of emotions. They missed the emotions. That he is selfish in bed. He only cares about himself. He taps her on the shoulder, asking if she feels like having sex. No? Well, that's it then. This is such a low level for most women, except for those who are extremely sexually overstimulated. They will always feel like having sex, and here he even taps her on the shoulder. But even such a sentence can turn her on, but most women can't get turned on by such a sentence. It rather turns them off. So are we going to have sex or something else? But, well, anyway, and this is common among guys. And it's common that they don't realize it. wouldn't hurt to behave kindly, with the woman during the day if they want sex in the evening. So I consider it extremely important to enhance emotional connection and hygiene. Thank you. The fact that you asked is because you have high emotional intelligence and you don't see this as a shortcoming, but you don't know what other men are like, nor do you need to know. But you see, this program offers a solution to every single male problem I've encountered. But obviously, you don't need to apply all 30 concepts to your own life. Okay, so we were discussing emotional intelligence. In fact, if we want to understand what is good for the other person, emotional intelligence is necessary for that. And of course, sex is a social game. It's not just about the man having a good time, but also about the woman. And it's important to recognize and sense the signals, especially if the woman is not willing to express it herself. Empathy is crucial in such cases. So for good sex, this is indispensable. And this is what emotional intelligence is all about. It's definitely important to spread this. Another important revelation during the program was when I compiled which elements would be needed to cover all the problems I've ever seen or experienced that hinder erection. To teach men how to treat women in a respectful and considerate manner. This is extremely important because if we don't know something or someone, we generally fear it. And if we are afraid, then obviously we become anxious and cannot perform. And many men say that they don't understand women, that they can't figure them out. And these are the consequences. That's why I conducted women's knowledge training over several days in the program. So you can get closer to understanding women's way of thinking and interpret the signals they give off. Because, as you know, women are not straightforward. I emphasize this many times. Due to their socialization towards kindness, the good girl mentality, everyone wants them to be a good girl. And that's why they are not willing to give honest feedback to men. Because being a good girl is equivalent to lying. Is this harsh too? I haven't heard it put this way before. Well, you won't hear it. These are my words, so if something is not my own thought, I will indicate it. For example, the chart. That's not mine. I learned it from Dr. 20, from our sex therapist training. But now let's talk about what are the things that are my great realizations and how I help men with them.
It's not new that traumas need to be processed, but perhaps what might be new is that it's not just the trauma from a partner that matters, but everyone, every woman, sister, meeting everyone. And of course it teaches, is this strange? Or rather, no, well, the role of the mother, or in these studies or these, because since I am dealing with this, and I think it might have come up in Martina's program as well, but the role of the mother is very defining already, because in early childhood, the formation of attachment patterns in the first 1,000 days greatly determines how we relate to women in our relationships. And perhaps the role of the mother is the most, I usually say that the whole world is in the hands of mothers. If mothers love well, then it's good. Then later on, connections are easier and giving love becomes a much more natural thing. If not, then this thing gets damaged and then it needs to be patched up. it could be hammered. Thank you. Yes, but the situation is that every woman matters with whom a man experiences trauma. Every girl. A sister is of outstanding significance. Why? Because she is our first human connection to the world that is equal. We compare ourselves to her. In many cases, a sibling is incredibly defining. It's always about the parents. But I think a sibling can often be even more significant than a parent. So yes, there was such a case in therapy, where someone really hated their sister because she was always favored, blah, blah, blah. And this developed into misogyny. Well, this is also a huge lesson in the program. There's a section about this. But they didn't know. It wasn't conscious that they hated all women, but since this is the first experience with girls that is equal, so we can't include the mother here. This was always there, and whenever they tried with a girl or a woman, then again the feeling I mentioned earlier, that the first feeling goes down into the subconscious, which is connected to that particular part, in this case, the woman as such. And what is the associated feeling? Women who are my equals must be hated because they have it better anyway. They are spoiled. They have privileges, blah, blah, blah. And many men seriously believe this, by the way. And this can often be traced back to the sister. She was loved more, or at least that's how I felt. Again, here it's not the facts that matter, but how you feel. Well, and then this misogyny also needs to be processed. By the way, this is no longer important. Misogyny has become a central problem today because I observe it not only in men, but also in women, that they hate other women. They could drown them in a spoonful of water. And the reason for this misogyny, among other things, is not rivalry, as everyone says, but in my opinion, is that women's sins are hidden. However, people sense it.
How many things are connected to them, the women. We always criticize men for being abusers and so on, blah, blah, but we hardly ever hear about how a woman drove someone crazy, whether another woman or her partner, with her words, because women are excellent at emotional abuse, and words are their domain in which men do not excel as much. So for a man to outdo a woman in a verbal battle is not so easy. And that's why this weapon remains for women as their only weapon, because they can't beat men physically. And they generally don't rape them unless it's in the rear. And, neglect. Okay, that yes, but not. They don't pay attention to him. They don't take care of him. But for a man, it's never as painful, by the way, as neglect is for a woman. So what remains? This emotional or verbal abuse. And there is so much cruelty, which we don't really want to talk about, because for men, this is somewhat embarrassing. So they won't make it public. The other woman who perhaps suffered because of such a cruel woman also doesn't speak up, because now this might be uncomfortable for the woman who ended up on the losing side. You understand. So this remains hidden, but it's there. And it builds into a collective consciousness, meaning we have a shared consciousness and a shared subconscious. The information integrates, showing how many evil women there are. But we don't talk about it. Yet the information is there. The unprocessed feeling is there. And again, I think it gets activated like a trigger-induced stimulus when a woman gets close to a man. And that's why I found it very important to also address misogyny. I feel it. It's incredibly common. And
As part of the program, you can get both of my books, and one of the books deals with my porn addiction. Does it include a case study like that? Oh, no, it doesn't include, or does it include? I can't even remember if I included both or just one. I only included one. There were two men who remained very strongly in my memory from this perspective, because both were incredibly kind to me. So you would never think in your life that they are the misogynists. So they, back then I was still conducting sexual therapy in person. So they not only came to see me, but one brought chocolate and the other brought a book, which you wouldn't mind as a therapist, wondering what this is about. And they were exactly the ones who were huge misogynists. It wasn't easy for me to realize. You see, I was still at the beginning of my career back then. But then it dawned on me, of course. And they didn't want to believe it about themselves either when I confronted them with it once I realized it. But how could a man's penis function if, in reality, what he wants to achieve with it, the cougar, he hates. Or at least he hates the bearer of the cougar. He might not hate the cougar, but since he can't have it on its own, unless he buys a fake cougar, again, the negative feeling towards someone distances him from it, towards someone or something.